Congresswoman, how's it going?
It's going great. Thank you for having me on today.
Yeah, this is the first time I've talked to you since you have become a member of Congress.
Yep.
So welcome to the Death Star in Washington, D.C.
Thanks. It's good to see you again. And the last time I saw you was right before I was thinking about running for Congress.
Yeah.
And here we are today.
So we met in 2014-ish, maybe a little bit earlier than that, because you had emerged as sort of a Ron Paul guy / Tea Party activist / Senate candidate. Do you remember the salad days?
Yeah.
Whatever happened to this idea of constitutionally limited government and fiscal responsibility within the Republican Party?
It's gone by the wayside, and I can't exactly pinpoint it because it's been decades in the making.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing today, it's almost like we're fast forwarding this disaster that's on the horizon, and I don't understand it. This is a problem created by both sides. For the longest time, for decades, Republicans wanted more defense spending, and for that, Democrats wanted more spending on social welfare programs, and they just kept increasing it year after year after year, and then neither side holding the other accountable because they were both getting what they wanted. And then fast forward to this pandemic that we're having, and it's totally out of control. And government forced businesses to shut down. Yet government didn't shut down. They stayed entirely open. They didn't cut any of their spending. They didn't do anything. They didn't make any of the tough decisions that businesses had to make to keep going. And instead, they're just going to bankrupt everybody. And some of the spending packages they're talking about now, they're only getting larger, but the only way to pay for it is going to be with one of the highest tax hikes in American history. And Democrats are often very feeling, and they use these nice buzzwords like tax the rich and let corporations make them pay their fair share. But there's always going to be loopholes for the rich. There's always going to be some way to write it off or hold it in a trust. That there are things that they can use, financial mechanisms they can use to shelter, right? Everyone else is going to pay that bill.
Yeah, like they have lawyers and accountants that know how to play the game and know how to protect their income. That's how they got that way.
Right. The average American can't afford to do that. And so that bill gets passed down on the backs of people that are making much lower wages and much lower salaries, and that do live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. My sense is that we're starting to see what happens when you helicopter $6 trillion in fake money onto an economy, because the real tax, particularly on people that hold cash, is inflation, right? Mm-hmm. And that's more insidious because nobody sees it. But if you're looking at, gas prices are maybe an exogenous shock kind of thing, but food prices, everything's going up right now. Lumber's through the roof. And that's got to be a combination of the government dropping a lot of money onto the economy and prohibiting a lot of people from working. So it's demand and supply.
They believe the federal government printed $4 trillion last year. They're on track to print another $4 trillion this year. The prices of everything is going up. We saw just last week with Colonial Pipeline, prices in my area went up about a quarter, and they haven't gone back down. And I question whether they even will. But the cost of milk, the cost of everything is going up. And then on top of it, worse yet, we've incentivized the unemployment. The federal government's paying you to stay home by giving you bigger checks. And they want to, from my understanding, continue to do it. They want people to get a check monthly from the federal government. It used to be in this country, you'd come here and you wanted to earn your success. You didn't want to be given it. Like most people, that's what they want to do, and yet here we are. We're failing, and that's why those unemployment numbers the other week were so abysmal. Economists were expecting 1 million new jobs, and it was 250,000 because of these, ass backward policies that do more harm. They're not bringing people out of poverty. They're not educating them. They're not getting them back to work.
Yeah. So you've been outspoken on this subject about these never-ending, overly generous unemployment benefits that go to gig workers. They go to people regardless of whether or not they're trying to find jobs, and it's created this huge gap between people that are unemployed, and yet there's this massive body of work that's actually needing to be done. South Carolina has also sort of led the charge. Your governor, I believe, was one of the first to say we don't want those benefits. Why not? Isn't that mean?
Well, there are already unemployment benefits at the state level. So if you do lose your job, I believe in South Carolina, maybe it's $300 a week, depending on what you were making beforehand. So there are already at the state level unemployment benefits. The problem with the last COVID relief package, which can't even call it that, but they did an additional $400 a week. And so when you look at the wages of folks during COVID-19, we're paying them more to sit at home or close to what their wages or salaries were. So why would they come back to work? Is there any reason? Is no surprise that, Colonial was having a hard time finding CDL truck drivers. Many of them are at home taking unemployment until it goes away. In South Carolina, federal benefits go away June 1st. The same thing with gig workers. Try to get a car, a ride from the airport to your home, or if you've been drinking to go back home, the prices are 4, 5, 10x what they were just even a few months ago. And so we're seeing it everywhere, lumber, fuel, literally everywhere, because of the impact that the unemployment benefits and then the stimulus checks on top of it. People have earned tens upon tens of thousands of dollars from the federal government, and they like getting a check and not working, and we need them back to work. South Carolina, for example, there are 85,000 jobs available right now, and there are 116,000 people who are on unemployment. If you want a job, you can damn near have a job. They're there, they exist across all sectors, all industries, all job levels. And one of the things I am encouraging people today is if you are at home on unemployment and you're in the state of South Carolina or another state that is getting ready to to take away the federal unemployment benefits, Texas was the most recent state I read, but now's the time to get a job. So if you're in Atlanta, I know that Papa John's was offering $2,000 signing bonuses, or if you want to interview with McDonald's, they'll pay you $50 cash to show up. Now is the time to negotiate a better wage, a better salary, better benefits before all these other states and all these other people get off unemployment in South Carolina starting June 1st. And once that happens, you're going to be competing with everybody. So now is the time. Go get that job, get better benefits, better pay, better salary, and provide more for your family. Go do it now.
So I'm thinking that about a press release you just point out demanding that Nancy Pelosi finally lift the mask mandate. And is it just the House floor? Is that what the rule is?
I believe it's just the House floor right now, though I was in a hearing just a few hours ago in oversight, and we were required to wear our masks. At one point, I was one of 2 members in the room, still required to wear my mask. And I was more than 6 feet away from the other member. And imagine following science. The far left uses that tagline, follow the science. Well, we are following the science.
Right.
And kids shouldn't be in masks. Kids aren't in schools. They're not passing COVID to one another. They're getting it from adults who bring it home. There are many people already in this country who've had COVID or have chosen to get vaccinated. And so we're adults. We should be able to make this decision. Wash your hands, people. Stay distant when you can, 3 feet, 6 feet. Don't do anything that you're uncomfortable with. Wear a mask. If you double up if you want to, but don't force out on other people that should have the freedom to choose what they want to wear on their face or not, whether or not they want to get vaccinated. South Carolina, again, we've done a remarkable job of balancing health and safety with getting people back to work and showing people how you can actually do it. And in states that opened up early or remained largely open through COVID, we're not having the same spikes that other states that were very draconian in their implementation of COVID-19 health policy. They're having spikes. I'm not an epidemiologist, but one can just gather that the exposure just hasn't been there. And every time they reopen, they're having challenges and troubles that states that were free and that were open just are not suffering from.
It strikes me that, and the reason I bring it up is that there's this old saying in politics, never let a crisis go to waste. And we've gotten so far at the tail end of this pandemic that it seems like theater. It almost seems like the president who is fully vaccinated wearing a mask next to other people that are fully vaccinated wearing a mask. It seems like
outside,
outside, not near anybody else.
Yeah.
Alone in their cars. I see that in DC. It sort of breaks my heart and makes me laugh at the same time. But it seems like at this point they just want the crisis and the fear to keep going on so that we can pass how much is the infrastructure bill they want to pass?
It's
Another couple
2.5
trillion
and counting.
Yeah.
They keep renaming it because they can't sell it to the American people. So it was the infrastructure package. Now it's like the American jobs plan. Now it's the American family workers plan. I mean, it's getting renamed, but it's a blank check to do whatever they want, and that's wrong. We don't have the money. We just don't have the money to spend. It does not exist.
Yeah. I remember a day when the idea of having, I don't even know what our deficit is anymore, but it's $1 trillion plus.
I think close to 3.
And nobody even knows what that means because it's so big.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the idea of just passing these huge multi-trillion-dollar omnibus bills would have been sort of antithetical to even Democrats would have never gotten behind something like that. But the crisis, right? The fear. And the demagoguery. And so far, the Biden administration seems to be running the table on this stuff. But it doesn't last forever. But I think that's why Nancy Pelosi still wants you to wear a mask, because the
right.
symbol matters, even though it's anti-science at this point. It's anti-freedom. It's sort of anti-common sense. It's anti-what mom told you.
Right.
But let's do it.
It's control and it's power, and it's scary. It's really scary where we are right now, and the amount of fear we've instilled in people, even just transitioning out of all of a sudden now masks are okay to take off. Now all of a sudden, I don't know what science has changed. Science hasn't changed in the last few days, but I'm glad to see the CDC say, hey, if you're vaccinated, don't wear a mask inside or out. And even when you talk to different healthcare officials within the federal and state government, a lot of them will give you conflicting mask advice. They work, they don't work. They only work for 24 hours if it's a certain kind of mask. I mean, it's all conflicting, and so's distrust. And it is an example of an erosion of our freedoms. And getting up here, I mean, I come from state politics and knowing somewhat what I was walking into in Congress, but to have literally a front row seat to the dismantling of our Constitution, of our freedoms, seeing it taken away, redistribution of power and money in this country, it's very scary where we are today. And then the divisions. I mean, in order to get reelected, you got to say the craziest things, and it's on both sides. You got to scare people the most, as opposed to empowering the people.
So let's take a step back for people that don't know you. You're a first-termer. You have some cool aspects of your story, and I want to go back to the Citadel, but when did you become what I would call a liberty Republican, sort of in the Ron Paul, Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, Mike Lee kind of zone?
When Ron Paul ran for president in 2012, it really, I volunteered and I saw him speak, would watch his debates, and really sort of dove into this idea of freedom and what does that mean, and how is it being stripped away? How is it being taken away? How is the government, in some cases, very manipulative, and how does policy affect everybody? And it was very inspiring to sort of be a part of that movement as well, and support the underdog. And when you look at where we are today, his message was spot on, particularly looking at this economic cliff that we are teetering on right now. He was very prescient in what the future would hold if we allowed government to have more power. And it was a learning experience. And politically, I never ever thought I'd be a member of Congress. I mean, I dropped out of high school and was waiting tables at a Waffle House at the age of 17. And to see the opportunity and the second chances I've had, and to hear that message with a lot of liberty folks too, and they care about the same issues that I think most people in this country care about. They don't want the government in their bedroom or their boardroom. They want to be given the freedom to achieve the greatest success that they can. They don't want barriers to get in the way. And that's a dream that every American should have, no matter your political affiliation or where you come from, walk of life, color of your skin, gender, your zip code, or where your family's from. Like, that is what everybody wants. That's why we're the greatest country in the world, is because of the freedom we have here.
So one of the cool aspects, and maybe counterintuitive until you understand it, aspects of the Ron Paul movement was how much support he got from military and veterans, as particularly in 12, one of his marquee issues was always, we're in too many wars, we don't have a purpose. And to me, that makes perfect sense. Did that resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. And then you see how spread thin we are around the world, and that we have difficulty sometimes winning these wars. And we've been in Afghanistan for over 2 decades now. We have soldiers, men and women serving in uniform over there right now. They weren't even born when 9/11 happened, and it really makes you think about why we do what we do, why we are why we are where we are today. But also there's strength and peace and defending the homeland and training back here. We could do a lot more here back at home and put that back into the economy, having our service members, more of them here versus overseas, and really questioning what we're doing over there, and looking at the elections we get involved in overseas. And we scream when other countries try to do it to us, yet we're doing it all over the world too. And so it's just, he really, I think, opened a door and educated people on what was really going on. And not many people were paying attention, but the Ron Paul movement, it was such a great movement. It was inspiring, and inspired many people to run for office, or at least carry some of those issues and those values forward for that movement.
You mentioned the trade-off between defense spending and domestic spending, and that Achilles heel amongst sort of the neoconservative Republicans, I've argued, is sort of the thing that broke the back of the Tea Party movement, because we wanted to balance the budget, we wanted to eliminate the debt, we wanted to reduce the size and scope of government, and you couldn't do that stuff as long as you were always fully funding the military, because that sounds good, and yes, we should absolutely fund the things that are essential so that we don't put our men and women in service in harm's way, but it's also a blank check. And that was the thing. You remember the back and forth between the Tea Party Republicans and the Republicans that absolutely needed more war. And I don't know how you can be fiscally responsible without putting everything on the table.
No, that's right. And I come from a family of veterans. I have a family member getting commissioned this weekend. Almost everybody in my family serves. And I mean, they by and large also agree with me. They don't want to see us fighting wars all over the world for their entirety. I have family members who've been deployed a half dozen times over the last 15 years. The toll that it takes on these young men and women who are sacrificing everything, and their families are as well. And when we look at the money that's spent overseas, and then even now, I mean, I looked at some of the training issues we have in our Air Force with some of our pilots and having deaths in training. And wouldn't it be better if we're going to spend that, but invest it here at home, invest it in the men and women that we're sending overseas, and send them to fewer places. And when we do go, we have a mission, and we have a plan to get in, get out, end it, and come home. And that's largely missing. You don't see that often anymore. And some of these wars have been going on for so long, people often forget about it. It's not top of mind. It's not front of mind, because we don't hear about it in the news every single day.
Yeah. How did you go from Army brat to high school dropout to first woman to graduate the Citadel? How does that happen?
I had this conversation with my staff yesterday, trying to explain to them why I sometimes do what I went a little rogue this weekend, but it was meaningful work and it was important work to me. But I have this thing where I can only do 0 or 100. Like, that is my speed. And I have this gene I call it the Fight Club, right? And fighting for the little guy. And I've been fighting against systems and trying to do right by those that have been wronged. When my dad retired, he retired to South Carolina, and I went to middle school and high school in my hometown. But when I was 16, I was raped, and it changed my life forever. I knew that if I came forward, I wouldn't be given a fair shake. Given back, this was the mid-90s. If you were a female victim, you were going to be dragged through the mud. 1 out of maybe 100 cases or 50 cases ever get tried. Out of that, another 1 out of 50 or 100 might get a conviction. Knowing how difficult that was, and knowing I was up against a system, I couldn't do that. And it crushed me. It literally crushed my soul. And I had no hope for the future. I said, this is it. I'm going to amount to nothing in my life, and I gave up hope on everything. And I dropped out of school, and I took a job at a Waffle House waiting tables, and I learned some really tough lessons during some tough times, and I learned about what it would take to work hard in this world, and I gave myself a second chance. And so I've by and large, since that moment in my life, I've been about second chances. And that was in 95. And then in 96, the Citadel decided to let women in. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote a majority opinion against VMI, or the Virginia Military Institute, and said if you were a government or state-funded, federally funded institution of higher learning, you couldn't discriminate based on gender. And the Citadel decided to let women in. And I didn't go there to be the first woman. I didn't go there to break a glass ceiling. I went there because I had something to prove to myself, that I could go to a place that was challenging, that I could face enormous adversity, and I wouldn't quit. And that is the only reason that I went there. And that experience gave me a second chance. And so I've always been about these second chances and sort of, fighting the system and trying to right wrongs that have been done to others.
And there were women that tried before you and dropped out.
Right.
So I'm assuming this is not an easy thing to do.
No, not an easy thing to do. And in fact, in my class, there were 4 women that started, and there were 2 that dropped out by Thanksgiving or Christmas. And so there were 2 of us that finished that first year, and the ratio of men to women was about 900 to 1. So it was definitely a test of character, a test of grit, a test of what I could and could not take. And I did it. And I ended up, I went from high school dropout to graduating at the top of my class. I gave up all the alcohol and drugs I was doing and focused on me and my work in school, and ended up graduating at the top of my class with almost a 4.0. I never thought that I'd ever be able to do that. And it was life-changing.
So was there a Viggo Mortensen, if you get the reference, from G.I. Jane, screaming at you the whole way, trying to undercut your progress?
I had a couple of those, more than one.
Yeah.
But I also had really good people around me that that I could talk to, and I developed some enormous, just lifelong friendships. And for the folks that I'm friends with that are from there now, I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today without that community. And the Citadel, now we're 22 years after I've graduated, and it's a totally different experience now, and they support women that are there. When I was there, being the first, when you're first at anything, when you're breaking what was back then doesn't seem controversial now, but it was a really controversial thing. But I also learned there when I was there that women are tougher on other women. And so it wasn't the male cadets necessarily, or the male alumni. It was the wives and the girlfriends that I really feared the most on what they were capable of doing. It wasn't the guys necessarily. And then when I went to corporate, when my first job I had a female boss, and she was tougher on us than the men. And so I learned some really interesting, lessons about life in that experience as well.
Yeah. I see now where you got the gumption to run, as I forget how old you were, but you were in your 30s running against forever incumbent Lindsey Graham. I assume you guys get along now.
We've smoothed things over.
but he was, incumbent forever, and you took him on in the Senate campaign at the height of the Tea Party movement. Who does that? That seems a little crazy.
It is crazy when I look back on it too, because I was like 35 or so-ish, or close to that, and had 2 young kids, but I was so passionate about what I believed in, and I've always been told, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I've always had that attitude, well, watch me. Let me show you how. The worst thing anybody could ever do to me is say no.
Yeah.
Because I want to prove them wrong. And here we are today.
Yeah. And you came back in a couple of years and ran for the State House. Is that right?
Yeah, ran for the State House. I had a special election in 2017 and served 3 years there before I came to Congress.
Was it something like you ran that first race and you had sort of decided personally, like, I'm not giving up just because I lost that one?
No, I actually said the opposite. I said, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah.
I mean, I raised over $700,000. It took so much work, and I said, I'm not doing it that ever again. But then when the special election came around in South Carolina, special elections are 8 to 10 weeks. So then I was like, well, I can do anything for 8 to 10 weeks. If I really, really want to do this, if I try it at the state level, 1, if I enjoy it, and 2, if I'm able to accomplish anything, then maybe we would do this. And I had 3 elections to get in, and then had a re-election, and had 4 races in the span of 10 months, and worked really, really hard, because so many times when people get elected, they just forget why they're there. They get intoxicated with power. And it's almost like when you see individuals who are elected for the first time and you see them on the floor or in hearings, it's just, you can just see it, like this wave of power, intoxication of power is taken over, and they lose sight of why they're there. And I didn't want to lose sight of that. And I wanted to make sure that I, one, did exactly what I said I was going to do. Is that even possible, right? Because I had lost so much hope in politics and politicians, and just seeing people run for office and make a name for themselves and then do the exact opposite of what they said they were going to do. One of the things that I admired about Ron Paul was that he was consistent throughout the years, the decades, always in his positions. And most oftentimes that consistency is lost on many folks. They get into the job and they just completely change on who they are, their value set or their system. And I said, we've got to do this differently. And that was my mission.
So you mentioned second chances, and there is a pattern in your short legislative career of focusing on criminal justice reform, particularly focused on the way that it sort of gobbles up young people and puts them into this vicious cycle of recidivism. And there's no opportunity to get your life back. There's no redemption. You just become caged with hardened criminals, and we get these absurd results we have in the American criminal justice system, where we're one of the top places in the world for putting people in jail. It just seems insane. Right.
And because of my experiences with second chances, I never thought I'd be in the place where hey, civil rights, criminal justice reform, prison reform, that those are my issues. But I've fallen into that. The one bill I had signed into law as a state lawmaker was a prison reform bill that I modeled. I read about the First Step Act that President Trump signed into law in December of 2018. I started digging around and seeing what was done at the state level in South Carolina, and learned a lot about the state detention facilities and state prison system, and was just sort of flabbergasted at some of the findings that I had. And we did this bill, and we were in the majority. I was Republican. It wasn't something that I had to reach across the aisle and do, but I did that anyway. And we came out with this really great bill that banned the shackling of female inmates when they were in labor and delivery. This medieval policy that was still going on until about 2 years ago shocked the hell out of me and everybody else.
Yeah, that's insane.
And we got rid of it.
Yeah.
And we did it in a way that was 100% bipartisan. Not a single person, when that thing was voted out of the chamber and went to the governor's desk to be signed into law, no one voted against it. Every single person voted for it, and it gave me a lot of hope. I grew up in a small town, South Carolina, where the difference between rich and poor is literally black and white, and we have not made the right decisions or done the right job to help give people the tools, whether that's education, family. Give folks the opportunity to pull themselves out of poverty. Oftentimes a government policy keeps them in poverty, keeps them uneducated. And this was just one small way that I could make a big difference in somebody's life, somebody who may need a second chance. And one of the things we did with that bill too is we allowed children to visit their moms in the state penitentiary once a week. If you want to give someone an incentive to make good decisions, to be a good inmate and to get out early, the best thing you could do is allow their children to come visit them and give them hope and give them a reason to get out. And so that's inspiring for me. But also the area where I grew up, this is the home of Walter Scott, who was shot in the back, and as he was running away for not paying alimony. This in my congressional district, it's the site of Mother Emanuel, or Emanuel 9, 6 years ago next month, where 9 people were murdered. 9 black residents were murdered by a racist white young kid out of a wholly different part of the state who came down just to murder them. And then most recently, Jamel Sutherland. And civil rights issues are issues that have been historically championed by Republicans, but we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
We don't work on these issues. And there are so many amazing programs that spend either the same amount or less than, say, prison, right? And have a far better rate of recidivism than the government could ever hope for.
Yeah. So let's get into Jamel Sutherland a little bit, because it's an aspect that I've only started to think about, that for whatever reason, we've turned prisons into a substitute for mental health facilities, and that story is just devastating to me. Where a guy with mental health issues was essentially tased to death, trying to get him to a bond hearing. Is that what it was?
A bond hearing. And it's worse than that even. This is a 31-year-old black man whose parents at the end of December wanted to got him admitted to a mental health facility. He's diagnosed with bipolar schizophrenia. And there was some sort of altercation in the mental health facility. It's not clear on whether he started a fight or was breaking up a fight or got into a fight. Something happened, and he was arrested and sent to a local detention center, and never had a criminal record before. And the officers were going into his jail cell where he was alone. He had a spoon and a towel. He was alone by himself in a jail cell, and it's clear in the video that came out a few days ago that he was in distress. Didn't understand, didn't know why he was there, and was entirely confused on why they were trying to get him out of the jail cell. And they were getting him out of the jail cell. They were taking him out to take him to another room in the same facility that had Wi-Fi to do a virtual bond hearing that he had no legal requirement to attend. A judge can issue bond without the individual being present. So instead of letting him sit in his cell alone and letting things de-escalate, the officers who were there were two of them who pepper sprayed him multiple times. And then they tasered him 9 times in 60 seconds, about 5,000 volts of electricity through his body. And continued, you can hear him, one of his last words is, what is the point of all of this? Why are we doing this? And as he told the officers he couldn't breathe, he went limp. There was a knee on his neck, a knee on his back for several minutes, and they put a face guard over his face that was bloodied, and they dragged him out of the cell face down. And the parents didn't even know he was in jail.
Yeah.
And I was devastated when I heard about this story, because he's not the first. This is not the first time this has ever happened in this country. And mental health, it's really opened my eyes to how we treat those who are mentally ill, and the percentage of folks who are in either federal, state, or local detention centers who have severe mental illness or mental health issues like Jamel did, and how we handle them. I mean, I just am aghast at the way he should never have been in jail in the first place, and the way that they're treated. I mean, he was killed for Wi-Fi, to go into a room that had Wi-Fi, and it's unacceptable. It's unforgivable, and we've got to hold folks accountable, and we've got to be able to talk about these issues and really do something about it. I'm looking forward to seeing what Senator Tim Scott does in the Senate, and I'm told there may be some mental health legislation as part of that. I'm going to look and see what I can do on the House side. I never thought that prison reform and criminal justice reform would be something of significance that I would work on, but it just keeps coming to me, and it's something I'm going to continue to work on, and it is a huge priority for me now. And I keep seeing this over and over and over again, and it's got to stop. And Republicans have to lead on this issue. Yeah. We can't be silent.
Yeah, and you of course know the partisan narrative where Black Lives Matter emphasize police brutality, and I think quite often in a very justified way. And some conservatives are constantly defending the police no matter what. And it strikes me that one dynamic I see again and again and again when you see somebody dying in police custody or this kind of scenario is like, are they not trained in de-escalation? It seems like they're always ramping up, and it seems like that's a institutional problem,
right?
That they thought that what they were doing to Jamel Sutherland was standard procedure.
They thought it was appropriate and that it wasn't excessive use of force.
Yeah,
which to me is shocking. But this week I met with talked with the family last night, and I'm starting to meet with different groups who've worked on these issues. I'm going to work with law enforcement agencies, but also Republican and Democrat groups that are very knowledgeable about what statutes say and our laws say and what policies are dictating around the country to do better. I mean, we cannot continue down this path. But at the same time, if law enforcement doesn't take decisive action, as was the case in Jamel Sutherland's case, not taking decisive action to put these officers on administrative leave indefinitely until the investigation concluded or was resolved puts more of our men and women in uniform who are on the street, the good actors, the vast majority who are, puts their lives at risk. And the two are not mutually exclusive. The extremism of both sides, neither side is 100% right. And what we can't do is escalate the rhetoric and put law enforcement lives on the line when really we need them to be better trained, better equipped. De-escalation is an issue I'm trying to figure out and learn about now. What are we doing at the federal level? How are these patients handled? How are law enforcement trained? I can't affect state or local laws, but I can do absolutely whatever I can at the federal level to figure out what do we do? How are they treated? What percentage of, I don't even know, our information is so all over the place. I don't even know if that I'll get enough data on what percentage of in our federal penitentiary system are folks who are mentally ill. I don't even know if that data even exists right now, because it's not something that we've put any really time or attention or effort into looking at. Oftentimes, mentally ill patients, it's just not as sexy as Black Lives Matter. But here we are, a young Black man who was also mentally ill, and it's a serious, serious problem.
Yeah. Okay, let's switch gears, because there's a couple of other issues I want to get to, but I do agree with you that there's this sort of transpartisan liberty Republicans and progressive Democrats where they can find lots of common ground on criminal justice reform in a way that I would consider very constitutionally conservative, free market, libertarian, whatever brand you want to give it. Now, here's sort of, I'll put on my tinfoil hat.
Mm-hmm.
You have, I think you're on the committee of jurisdiction, but the post office has a surveillance program called ICOP. What the hell?
Yeah, what the hell? Seriously. And we had a briefing with the chief inspector or chief security inspector general a couple of weeks ago, and unfortunately it was a closed door hearing. And I really wish it was in the public, because he would say one thing in one sentence and then say the complete opposite in the same breath. And I called him out on it. There are plenty of other federal agencies that are looking online, I'm sure,
there's a whole
probably
alphabet
warrantless.
soup,
I mean,
right?
yeah, there's an alphabet soup doing it, but like they can barely deliver the mail on time, and now you want a surveillance program on American citizens. Like, I mean, and I even have questions on are they reading the mail? Also, they're looking at what kind of mail that people are getting, and when you look at it at the outset, it looks like they were targeting conservatives. I mean, the right to free speech is everybody's right. That is the First Amendment. But then one of the things that he said to me when we were in this briefing was that, well, it's not really a program. But then at the same time says, well, there's an executive over the program and they've got 8 employees that do this for their job. And they couldn't identify how much money was being spent on it. They couldn't identify when the program started. We were given 2 different reasons why it was started. We were saying, well, the Post Inspector General, Louis DeJoy, well, he had threats on him. And then there were threats in Minnesota for a physical post office. It's not the same.
Right.
And so the obfuscation or dishonesty or just not answering the question, it's the same thing, is a huge disservice. And I want that hearing public. The public has a right to know what they're actually doing, how much time, how much money, where's that data going, how long is it going to be there, and who's looking at it.
So I've actually worked on this issue, but I've always been a little confused because the post office is like an independent agency within the executive branch. It supposedly is a profit-seeking organization, but it's not. Is this like a mission creep thing where they need a reason to exist since their original mission really doesn't? They don't need to deliver the mail anymore. The market's actually taking care of that.
Yeah, I think every agency, the federal government, is a mission creep right now, and it's been that way for decades.
Yeah.
Just keeps growing bigger and bigger, literally with no end in sight.
Okay, the gotcha question.
Okay.
Waffle House or In-N-Out?
Oh, Waffle House.
See, you're partisan now.
I mean, I am partisan. It's the best coffee a $1.80 can buy. I mean, it's so good. And you can see everybody from every walk of life, every socioeconomic, like everybody is at the Waffle House. We need one in D.C. actually. I understand that one does not exist here.
It does not exist here. There's not an In-N-Out either, so this is
Yeah.
sort of a barren culinary wasteland.
Yeah, and I've even had Christmas dinner. I had one time when my son was 2 and I was pregnant with my second kid, and we were supposed to be on vacation, but just we were struggling with a toddler and being pregnant, and ended up being on the road on Christmas Day, and it was the only place open on the interstate.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan.
Christmas Day at the Waffle House.
Yeah, it's great.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
That was amazing. Where can I get more content just like that?
It's a great question. You're clearly a discerning consumer of the best content. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and click the bell. And if you're consuming podcasts, go to Apple, Stitcher, anywhere you get them. I'm in. Kibbe on Liberty, honest conversations with interesting people.